Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. As-salatu was-salamu ala rasulihil ameen. Wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. A famous English writer once said, the most effective way to destroy people is to deny and wipe out their own understanding of their history. My heartfelt thanks to Friday Forum Kuwait for giving me an opportunity to present before a smart and eloquent crowd. I should say, it really requires courage from the side of Friday Forum to assign such an important topic to a novice speaker like me. The story of Muslim freedom fighters of Kerala will be clear only if we understand their social composition and the historical process that came to affect the Kerala Muslims. From time immemorial, the southwest coast of India, the Malabar, had good trade relations with the Arabs. Many historians testify the presence of Arab trade centers and settlements in the coast as early as 3rd century BC. With the spread of Islam in Arabia in the 7th century, Islam also came to Kerala through the Arab traders. Owing to the financial and the military benefits that came through the conversion of people, the rulers of Kerala encouraged mass conversions. In addition to that, many lower caste Hindus embraced Islam to escape from the evils of caste system. The religious tolerance of the kings and people were very high during those times, and Islam spread very peacefully. The following centuries witnessed a rapid increase in the Muslim settlements, especially in the coastal urban areas, which were the pockets of Arab trade. In short, the Muslim community of Kerala, or the Mapulas as they were called, originally consisted of either Arab traders or their descendants or any natives converted to Islam. Until the end of 15th century, Muslims were a major power within the old kingdoms of Kerala and had great political influence among the Hindu rulers, especially the Zamarins and Rajas of Calicut. But the arrival of Portuguese traders in the late 15th century checked the then well-established and wealthy Muslim community's progress. The Portuguese deprived them of their Arab trade and let loose a reign of terror, which caused great economic crisis, and Muslims were compelled to move inland in search of opportunities in agriculture. But in the traditional land owning system, they were forced to accept the lowest grade of landless laborers. Brahmin Janmis and upper caste Hindu landlords possessed the land, and the Muslim tenants had no right for ownership, but only to cultivate. By the middle of 18th century, the majority of Muslims of Kerala became landless laborers, poor fishermen, and petty traders. The superior caste treated the Muslim tenants in the same way as they treated the lower castes involved in agricultural operation. And this ruptured the cordial relationship that existed between them. In short, economic decline, hostility from Hindus, and a new militancy were the effects of a Portuguese period on the Muslim community. Though the Mysoreans ruled Malabar only for a small period of 26 years, several important administrational changes which were beneficial to the Muslims took place. For the first time, land was surveyed and a direct system of payment of a portion of actual produce to the government was introduced. The most important aspect was the elimination of intermediaries for the collection of taxes. Also, many upper caste landlords fled to Travancore after selling the Janmam rights, which provided an occasion for the Mapulas to own the agricultural land. Consequently, the hostility between the communities that developed during the Portuguese period further widened with the rule of Mysoreans. In 1792, Malabar was surrendered to the British by Tipu Sultan and became a part of Madras Presidency. From the very beginning of their rule, the British followed a favorable policy towards the Hindus as they were opposed by the Mysoreans. They reintroduced the old system by delegating the authority of revenue collection to the old Rajas and Jannis of Malabar. The domination of the Hindu upper caste was not just re-established, but also heightened. This was against the interest of the Mapulas, and in turn, they refused to pay taxes. Meanwhile, disturbances started in some parts led by Mapula leaders like Elambulasheri Unnimu Samupan, Chemben Poker, and Athan Moin Kurikal. Kunyali Mupan, popularly known as Elambulasheri Unnimu Samupan, is said to be the first man in Malabar to organize a united opposition against the British. He was an official under Tipu and helped the people from the exploitation of landlords. The British tried to attract him by offering a pension of ₹1,000 per annum. But when he refused, a reward of ₹3,000 was declared for his capture. But things didn't go the way British expected. He strengthened his forces by joining with another Mapula leader, Chemben Poker. It was a time when Parashi Raja was advancing against the British, and Unni Musa and his followers joined him and used guerrilla warfare techniques as their weapon. During the same period, religious scholars like Umar Khali of Veliangod, Sayyid Alavi Tangal, and his son Sayyid Fazal Pukoya Tangal of Mamburam also played a key role in the struggle against British. Umar Khali of Veliangod is said to be the first to advocate a non-tax agitation in India. He spread the message of communal harmony and religious tolerance brought by Malik Dinar. He believed that the religious faith and patriotism are two sides of the same coin. When he condemned the revenue officials who approached him for the collection of tax dues, a complaint was lodged against him and he was asked to appear at Chavakad and was arrested and jailed. The next day, he made a narrow escape from the jail. And when the Calicut collector issued an order to arrest Khali, he presented himself before the collector. Later, when he was asked to regret for advocating non-payment of taxes, he refused, and he was again imprisoned for some days and was later released. And he was later released, sensing the moods of the Mapulas. Similarly, Sayyid Alavi Tangal of Mamburam also strongly criticized the British atrocities on the Mapula peasants and encouraged them to take arms against the alien rulers. For this purpose, he wrote a poem, A Saiful Bator. Tangal extended stiff resistance against the caste system. In the Malabar Manual, written by British officer William Logan, he says, Sayyid Alavi Tangal was not only influential among the Muslims, but all people in the region, especially among the Dalits. The Dalits used to approach him to express their grievances and seek solutions. Many uprisings carried against the landlords were motivated by Tangal. Cherur Padapata narrates the battle fought against the British under his leadership at Cherur in Malappuram district, which is also recorded as Kaprata Krishna Panikar Pata in Malabar Manual. In the Cherur battle, Mapulas joined hands with oppressed classes and fought against the local landlord Kaprata Krishna Panikar, who disgraced a newly converted Dalit woman. It is said that he got wounded in the Cherur riot and died of it in 1843. Similarly, son of Sayyid Alavi Tangal, Sayyid Fazal Pukoy Tangal, was yet another great scholar and mass leader of the time. He undertook the social and political works left incomplete by his father and penned a book titled Uddatul Ikra, people. There is some issue. Am I audible? Everything is fine, right?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. So I was talking about Sayyid Fazal Pukoy Tangal. So he wrote a book titled Uddatul Umrah to make people aware of the danger of British rule. The British rulers were very worried by his increasing influence and his anti-British stance, and also about his role in the outbreaks, which is clear from the letter written by then Malabar collector H.V. Connolly to the British governor, which said Tangal is a very dangerous opponent in all aspects. He is an empire himself within the British Empire, and our police are helpless in his case. But the British didn't dare to arrest him, fearing reprisal from the public. Though the role of Sayyid Fazal Pukoy Tangal in the riots or in the outbreaks were not proven, the collector Connolly secretly deported him. Connolly's action enraged the Mapula community, who were already being suppressed through the War Knife Acts. Thus, he was murdered in his well-guarded bungalow. Some days later, the suspects were captured and killed. Although only 4 persons were involved in the murder case, 719 people were arrested and 9 villagers were fined with heavy charges. Due to all these measures, the Mapula community experienced great sufferings. Thus, the middle of the 19th century until early 20th century, the general resentments among the Muslims led to a long series of outbreaks. As the disturbances continued, the government appointed an inquiry commission under William Logan in 1881, which pointed out agrarian discontent as a root cause of these uprisings. He suggested a number of measures which resulted in the passing of Malabar Compensation for Tenants Improvement Act and Land Acquisition Act. With the commencement of 20th century, several changes took place in the Mapula community. Their long and unending sufferings created hatred in the minds of Muslims, not only towards the government, but to everything that they brought, like their religion, their culture, and even their language. The English language was proclaimed by ulamas as a language of hell, and instead of Malayalam language, they used the Arabic Malayalam script. They did not send their children to the schools where these languages and secular subjects were taught. This attitude of segregation resulted in illiteracy, unemployment, and further backwardness of the community. In this situation, a group of scholars came forward with vision and wisdom, led by Sayyid Sanaullah Makti Tangal, Sheikh Muhammad Mahin Hamadani Tangal, and Wakam Abdul Khadar Maulavi. Wakam Abdul Khadar Maulavi, popularly known as Wakam Maulavi, is the father of Muslim Renaissance in Kerala. He was a great patriot and began his career as a journalist. In 1905, he started a Malayalam newspaper named Swadeshabhimani, which contributed to the all-round awakening of the people of Kerala. But within 5 years, the newspaper and the press was sealed and confiscated by the British police due to its criticisms against the government and Diwan of Travancore. But in its brief life, it succeeded in setting a new trend in journalism. Maulavi campaigned the need for modern education, the education of Muslim women, and the elimination of potentially bad customs in the Muslim community. Influenced by the writings of Muhammad Abdu of Egypt and his reform movement, Maulavi started Muslim and Deepika in Malayalam and Al-Islam in Arabic Malayalam. It was in continuation of these situations that different phases of national movement came to surface. Until 1916, the Muslims of Kerala had shown little interest in the national movement, and it was only a few educated leaders who had actually participated in these movements. The Congress was seen as a predominantly upper caste Hindu organization. But things changed in 1920 when Gandhiji decided to combine the call for Swaraj with the Khilafat movement that sought to preserve the Ottoman Empire, and the authority of the Turkish Caliph as the spiritual leader of the Islamic world. On 18th August 1920, Gandhiji, along with Shaukat Ali, visited Calicut to spread the message of non-cooperation and Khilafat. In response to Gandhi's call, a Khilafat committee was formed, and Mapulas, under their religious head, Mahdum Tangal of Panani, pledged their support and enthusiastically participated in these movements. Thus, it was a period of great Hindu-Muslim unity, and both communities jointly formed the Khilafat Kudian Committee. Khilafat leaders like Moidu Maulavi, Abdul Rahman Sahib, Variam Kunnatu Kunya Ahmad Haji, Ali Musliar, and several others were in the forefront of these movements. However, when the Khilafat and non-cooperation movements were at its zenith, the rebellion of 1921 brought the whole episode into a tragic end. On 19th August 1921, a series of repressions which wounded the sentiments of Mapulas took place. Adding fuel to fire, the police attempted to arrest Vadakke Veetil Muhammad, the secretary of Pukotur Khilafat Committee, on false litigations of theft of a gun belonging to the Tirumul part of Nilambur Kovilagam. On 20th August 1921, a regiment of Gurkhas and battalion of Malabar police arrived at Tirurangadi in early morning. While searching Vadakke Veetil Muhammad, the secretary of Pukotur Khilafat Committee, the police party raided the Kirakepalli of Tirurangadi and arrested 3 wanted men from their houses and took them to the magistrate court. The news of police raid spread like wildfire throughout Tirurangadi and neighboring areas, and Ali Musliar, accompanied by some Mapulas, approached the authorities for the release of the arrested persons. When they reached the magistrate court, Rauli, the ASP of Palakkad, requested them to sit down peacefully till the magistrate arrived. As soon as they sat down, Rauli ordered firing. The enraged mob attacked the police and the army, and 6 of them, including ASP Rauli and Head Constable Taisheri Moideen, were killed. At this time, Abdurrahman Sahib and Moidu Maulavi arrived at Tirurangadi and saw a violent mob marching towards the Mamburam shrine, who were mistaken by the rumors that the shrine had been demolished by the soldiers, and hence Ali Musliar declared jihad against the British. In the evening of 20th August 1921, Moidu Maulavi and his companions noticed an armed mob of about 2,000 Mapulas from the outlying areas moving towards Tirurangadi, all of them enraged by the false news. Moidu Maulavi made an attempt to pacify the mob, but the mob was too violent and did not yield results. Immediately, trouble resumed in Eranad, and soon martial law was declared in Eranad, Valluvanad, and Ponnani taluks. One of the most outstanding leaders of the rebellion, who made efforts to control and guide its course, was Variyankunnathu Kunya Ahmad Haji, a close relative of Ali Musliar. His father, Moideen Kuti Haji, was deported and jailed in Andaman Islands for his participation in a rebellion against the British. Kunya Ahmad Haji was greatly drawn towards poems like Malappuram Padapatte and Badar Padapatte, which were on the exploitation of the peasants by the feudal landlords, and used them as an instrument to rally the locals against the British. When the leaders of the Khilafat movement and Indian National Congress introduced him to the Khilafat cause, he got actively involved and was mostly heard all over Calicut and South Malabar. As the rebellion spread across Eranad and Valluvanad taluks of Malabar district, Britishers and their loyals escaped, leaving a vast territory under the control of local rebels. The territory was declared as an independent state in August 1921, and Kunya Ahmad Haji proclaimed himself as the Raja of Hindus, Amir of Muslims, and Colonel of the Khilafat army, and virtually the king of Eranad and Valluvanad. He appointed officers from his men, issued passports, restricted looting, returned gold and money which were looted from the banks, to its rightful owners, issued laws against the British Raj, and gave protection and asylum to all communities. Other leaders like Ali Musliar and Chembrasheri Tangal also asked their people to provide protection for Hindu families at Manjeri. By the end of August, a large number of British and Gurkha soldiers came to the riot-ridden areas. Clashes with the rebels continued, and one of the most notable encounters took place at Pukotur, often referred as Battle of Pukotur. Meanwhile, Ali Musliar surrendered. The other leaders like Sidi Koya Tangal and Chambrasheri Tangal too surrendered in December 1921. Variam Kunnathu Kunyahmad Haji resisted for some time, and finally, on 6 January 1922, he too surrendered. His surrender virtually sounded the death knell of the rebellion. In the midst of these calamities, there took place the most tragic episode in Malabar, the Wagon tragedy, in which 67 out of 100 Mapula captives who were dumped in a closed wagon and were taken from Tirur to Podanur near Coimbatore died of suffocation on the way. It was a terrible blood-curdling incident, and historians refer to it as the black hole of Podanur. The rebellion persisted for about 6 months. At the beginning of 1922, the rebellion had been completely suppressed. However, it was the most serious rebellion the British had to face since the revolt of 1857. The Malabar Rebellion is a layered story with multiple strands, such as the anti-colonial impulse, the religious aspect, the agrarian discontent, the police brutality, and hostility towards the capitalist landlords. Erasing any of these strands would result in an incomplete and lopsided picture of the event. Political activities in Malabar came to a halt, and Muslims suffered a great deal after the rebellion. The British government put them down harshly, and all kinds of atrocities were continued, and they remained as silent spectators of the political developments in the country. However, the Muslim leaders continued their efforts to awake their brothers from the slumber. One of the major leaders of the national movement in Kerala was E. Moidu Maulavi, who was born at Maranjeri near Ponani. He was a great freedom fighter, Congress leader, and Islamic reformer. After his studies, he joined the Indian National Movement in 1919. He was the founding secretary of Majlisul Ulama, which drew Mapula community towards Indian National Movement. Maulavi was arrested and underwent rigorous imprisonments during the Khilafat movement and had to undergo imprisonment for 9 months in 1930 for his participation in the Payyanur Salt Satyagraha. Yet again, he was given jail terms for a period of 3 years for taking part in Quit India movement, and he was released in 1947 after independence. He was specially honored in the Indian Freedom Fighters Conference in Allahabad, and he was the one who hoisted the flag in the opening ceremony. He was instrumental in drawing Muhammad Abdul Rahman Sahib into the freedom movement. Abdul Rahman Sahib was born at Kodungalur in Thrissur district. Being a follower of Mahatma Gandhi, he discontinued his studies in Aligarh University to participate in non-cooperation movement and Khilafat movement in Malabar. Following the Mapula riots of 1921, he worked for establishing peace, but was arrested and imprisoned for 2 years. For breaking the salt law on the Calicut beach during the Salt Satyagraha of 1930, he was lathi charged and imprisoned for 9 months at Kannur Central Jail. He was the editor and publisher of the Malayalam daily Al Amin. He always opposed the two-nation theory of Muslim League and mobilized the Muslim masses against it. Being an admirer of Subhash Chandra Bose, he associated himself with All India Forward Bloc formed by him. When the Second World War broke out, he was jailed from 1940 to 45 by the British. Another person, K.M. Maulavi from Tirurangadi in Malappuram, was the leader of Malabar Khilafat Committee. During 1920-21, he organized Khilafat meetings in different parts of Malabar. He urged Mapula Muslims to seek a peaceful resolution to their grievances and advised the necessity of a peaceful protest during the Malabar Rebellion. British police issued an arrest warrant for Maulavi after the rebellion, but he moved to Kodungalur and lived there for 11 years, where he strengthened the reform movements inspired by Wakam Maulavi. He was the founding vice president of Indian Union Muslim League. Similarly, how many of us knows the freedom fighter in Bepur Sultan? Bashir was born near Vaikam in Kottayam district. He left school at 5th grade to become active in freedom movement and participated in the temple entry agitation at Vaikam, which ended in 1925 with Gandhiji's participation. In the course of activities, he managed to touch Mahatma's arm, which he later regarded as his life's most thrilling moment. Inspired by Swadeshi ideals of Gandhi, he started wearing khadi. As there was no independence movement, active independence movement in Travancore or Kochi, being princely states, he went to Kozhikode to take part in the salt satyagraha, following which he was severely beaten and was imprisoned for 3 months in the Kannur prison. There, he got inspired by the stories of heroism by revolutionaries like Sukhdev and Bhagat Singh, and freed from prison, he organized anti-British movements and edited a revolutionary journal, Ujjivanam, because of which an arrest warrant was issued on him, and he left Kerala for a long period of 7 years. On his return, history repeated, and he was sentenced to rigorous imprisonments for his anti-government activities. Similarly, Wakam Majid was attracted to the ideas of his uncle, Wakam Maulavi. When the Indian national movement emerged in Kerala, he was in the forefront of its leadership and was one of the early architects of Indian National Congress in Travancore. In 1942, he was arrested and imprisoned for his participation in the Quit India movement. Subsequently, when the idea of independent Travancore was put forward, Majid became a strong opponent and was imprisoned for several months for taking part in the agitation against the move. He also opposed the two-nation theory and the Pakistan movement. He upheld the values of modernism in Islam and equally valued the thoughts of Sri Narayana Guru and emphasized the relevance of a casteless Hindu society. During the Silver Jubilee celebration of Indian independence, the nation honored him by giving Tamrapatra for his participation in the Indian freedom struggle. When INA hero Wakam Abdul Khadar was sentenced to death, it was Majid who brought Khadar's last letter to his father before his execution. Likewise, history can't write of this brave freedom fighter, INA hero, Sri Wakam Abdul Khadar. Most people confuse Wakam Abdul Khadar for Wakam Maulavi, but the fact that they are two different people is unknown to many. Wakam Khadar, sometimes known as the Bhagat Singh of Kerala, laid his life for the cause of freedom at an age of 26. After matriculation, he became an active member of Pradesh Congress Party, which was in the forefront of freedom struggle in the Travancore area. He went to Malaya at an age of 22, and from there, he joined the Indian National Army formed by Subhash Chandra Bose. He was one of the 20-member suicide squad sent to India to monitor the British troops. But the suicide bombers could not get close to their dream. All the 20 of them were captured and jailed by the British troops upon reaching the Indian coast, and 4 of them, including Khadar, were sentenced to death. On the night before his execution, he wrote 2 letters. In the eight-page letter to his father, he wrote, "Yes, I die between 5 and 6 o'clock on Friday, the 7th day of the month of Ramadan. You will certainly be proud when you get to know how peace, happy, and brave I was." In another letter to his friend, he concludes by saying, "My self-sacrifice is like a word erased as soon as it is written." In the early morning of September 10, 1943, all four were hanged in the Madras Central Jail. On Khadar's request, he was hanged on the gallows along with his friend Anandan Nair, by which he wished to convey the message that Hindus and Muslims are one. Wakam Abdul Khadar was the voice of a group of young people who believed that the country could be liberated only by expelling the British. Accordingly, the freedom movement of India was not the sole agenda of a particular community, but it had moved people of all sectors in their own capacity. In 1922, the Madras Governor General, Sir Thomas Munro, described Mapulas as the worst race in Malabar and the most hostile to the British administration, which allowed us enough to understand the attitude of Muslims of Kerala against the British. Many historians only try to belittle the Muslim community and were really keen to portray the tragedies following the Khilafat and Malabar Rebellion. It is unfortunate that there were stray incidents when certain anti-social elements exploited the volatile situation, causing hardships to the Hindu community. However, the leaders had vehemently opposed violence and disowned themselves from the rebellion. In a nutshell, the Muslim community of Kerala and its leaders had played a significant part in India's freedom struggle. No other community in colonial India had been bold enough to launch centuries of resistances against their ruling masters. Sadly, today, the history has been rewritten to protect the interests of many. There is a deliberate attempt to discredit the Muslim leadership and indeed the Muslim masses, and in order to spread in the Muslim community a sense of inferiority complex and to push them on a defensive stand. What have you done for this nation to deserve the benefits of its independence? We are asked. The year 2021 marks the 100th anniversary of Mapula Rebellion. The then backward community of Kerala in all means has now grown into one of the most educationally and financially progressing Muslim communities of the country. And hence, we have every responsibility to preserve, protect, and publicize the legacy of our leaders in its true form to safeguard the unity and integrity of our nation. Thank you. So this brings me to the end of my presentation. So shall we move on to a small Q&A? Are you ready? I can't hear you.
Okay, ready. Yes, please. Yes, definitely.
Okay, so first question. Which incident is referred by historians as the black hole of Podanur? I repeat, which incident is referred by historians as Wagon tragedy? Yeah, it's the right answer. The second question. Name the Muslim freedom fighter from Kerala who was executed at an age of 26 by the British.
Wakam Abdul Khadar.
Pardon?
Wakam Abdul Khadar.
Yeah, INA Hero Sri Wakam Abdul Khadar. That's the right answer. Over to the third question. Who is known as the father of Muslim Renaissance in Kerala?
Wakam Abdul Khadar Maulavi.
Wakam Maulavi, yeah. Fourth question. Who is the first to advocate non-tax agitation against British? Maybe this is a confusing question. Who is the first to advocate non-tax agitation against British? I can give you a clue. It was not Mahatma Gandhi.
Umar Gandhi.
Umar Khalid, yeah, correct answer. Now, the last and final question. Name the Mapula leader, an Islamic scholar who was deported by British to Arabia. Actually, this person was deported on the charges of his role in the rebellion and riots of 19th century. That is a very good clue. And later on, he went to Turkey and he became he got some good position and he was a good leader in Turkey. Any idea? Okay, I'll give you the answer. Mamburam Sayyid Fazal.
പിന്നെ ആ പ്രോബ്ലം വന്ന് പിന്നെ ആ പ്രോബ്ലം വന്ന് ഞാൻ ലീവ് ചെയ്യണം കഴിഞ്ഞ് ഞാൻ ലീവ് ചെയ്യണം
Ali Musliar.
No. Mamburam Sayyid Fazal Pukoyatangal. He was deported, and following which Collector Kanoli was killed by the Mapulas and all. So that brings me to the end of my session. Thank you for listening. Really